this is one of those movies that it doesn't matter how many times I watch it, it lands just as hard. And I can feel that way about Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies too. Like I can watch the first Sam Raimi Spider-Man movie and some people will say it's nostalgia goggles, and there might be a little bit of nostalgia at play, but I can feel what it was like to watch that, when it first came out, and especially with Spider-Man 2. And when I watch Into the Spider-Verse, I get that same feeling of like something special. Like I'm watching something special, the same way I felt when I was watching the Raimi films for the first time.
Hello, friends. I'm Anderson Marchak.
And I'm Ricardo Segura.
And we are the Panel Bros. Welcome to the panel.
Welcome to the panel. Yeah.
All right, here we are.
Oh, yeah.
And as of this recording, it is late 2023.
Mm-hmm.
And Ricardo and I had planned on talking about this movie for some time because we saw it was going to be an anniversary date.
Mm-hmm.
And it was directed by three people, Bob Persichetti, Peter Ramsey, and Rodney Rothman.
Yeah.
And the multiple directors kinds of gives a hint away that it is not a live action movie. It is an animated movie.
Mm-hmm.
It was released on December the 14th of 2018. So we're here at the 5-year anniversary. Today, the Panel Bros are going to be doing a breakdown for Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse.
Man,
yeah,
what a movie.
Uh-huh.
I remember seeing this in the theater by myself. This was one of those times where I was like, you have to see this in the theater. Don't miss it. Do everything you can to get out there and go see it. And I had to make some moves and everything else, and I was able to go see it in the theater, and I was so happy because this is one of those movies that would obviously be great no matter where you see it, but that theater experience of watching this level of animation, this character, this story on the big screen, man, that was a chef's kiss of a movie.
Yeah, for me, it just gets better with every watch, and we'll talk about just those moments and what makes Into the Spider-Verse such a special movie throughout our breakdown today. So let's get started.
Let's get it.
So, of course, we have our opening scene here, and it's Peter Parker telling us his story.
Yes.
We get a history lesson in Spider-Man, complete with the Spider-Man 3, the Raimi, the Staying Alive dance,
The dance. I love it.
Yeah, we get the old school theme song, Spider-Man, Spider-Man, we get that. From the jump, they're letting us know this is going to be a fun movie.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So
I loved this opening because, again, we know the movie is about Miles Morales, but it opens up with Peter Parker. And it's like, oh, okay, this is an interesting way of starting this movie. And we get to have like those really nice flashbacks to some of the most memorable scenes from the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies, and the memorable scenes for not being sometimes arguably the best, but sometimes being really funny, like you mentioned, like that Maguire dance scene. The fact that they put that in there was really, really fun and cool. So I like right from the gate, like you said, we were in for a very fun ride.
Yeah. So New York City teenager Miles Morales struggles to live up to the expectations of his father, police officer Jefferson Davis. And Jefferson sees Spider-Man as a menace. Miles's uncle, Aaron Davis, takes him up to an abandoned subway station to paint graffiti to cheer him up. And there, Miles is bitten by a radioactive spider. There is a gorgeous animated moment here where it happens. And it's funny because it isn't a big deal for Miles, because we get this big dramatic sequence of the spider biting him. And then all he does is this, and he swats it away.
Yes. Look, like there's so much to talk about that when it comes to the animation style of this movie. The animation is amazing, and it lends to really small moments like that and make them feel really big. And then you get like a nice comical effect with the slap. I'm also a fan of the scene in general because I love the camaraderie that we have between Miles and his uncle. Yeah. And it's a great testament to see how close their bond really is. And something, when it comes to the graffiti and street art, and this is something that they share. And I even love that in the scene, he tells him like, hey, like your dad and I used to do this. And he's like, what? No way. And he goes, yeah, but your dad became a cop. So that's out of, that doesn't happen anymore. But now it's our thing. And I do love the establishment of their relationship right here.
Yeah, and one would argue that Miles and his uncle are closer than him and his father.
Yes.
And it will be revealed that him and his his father and his uncle don't see eye to eye, and it just kind of makes the whole relationship complicated.
Yeah.
So upon being bitten by the spider, of course, Miles gains abilities similar to Spider-Man. We fast forward to when he starts showcasing those abilities. He's sticking to the walls. It's hilarious on
Mhm.
the outside of the building. Um, it gets a little meta because he's reading the Spider-Man comic, and Peter is saying the same things that he just said.
Yeah.
Stick. No, don't stick. No, stick.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
He's realizing he's getting Spider-Man's powers, and it's just entertaining. Returning to the station, he discovers a collider built by the Kingpin, who hopes to access parallel universes to bring back his late wife and son.
Mhm.
Spider-Man attempts to disable the collider while fighting Kingpin's henchmen, Green Goblin and the Prowler.
Yeah.
Green Goblin shoves Spider-Man into the collider, causing an explosion that kills Goblin and wounds Spider-Man.
Yeah.
So, Spider-Man gives Miles a USB flash drive designed to disable the collider, warning that the machine could destroy the city. And at this point, um, Peter had already realized Miles had powers like him. So,
Yes.
he went to save him, and it's like, oh no, you're just like me. So they had a very brief interaction where it's like, hey, once I get out of this, I'm going to teach you the ropes. I'm going to
Yeah.
show you the ropes. We're going to do this together. Um, Unfortunately, Miles watches in horror as Kingpin kills Spider-Man, and
Yeah, dude.
he ends up fleeing. So we didn't think that was going to happen in the
Nope.
trailers,
Nope. Not at all. Because again, when we watch the trailers, we're mainly dealing with Miles and some of the other characters that we're going to meet. This Peter, I don't recall in the trailers. So when he's introduced in the beginning of the film, like, oh, okay, we have this Peter. This is okay. I'm not sure where this is going. And he's killed off in the opening act, and it's a gut punch, man. And
right.
I loved the interaction between Peter Parker and Miles in this because, like you said, they kind of have that moment where they're feeling each other out. And there's some really fun stuff here that will make more sense when we ever discuss the sequel. And I don't want to talk about it just yet because I think it's nice to save it because things are pointed out in the sequel. But I love that there's this interaction between the two, and he goes, oh, like, you're like me. And I loved that Peter just instinctively was like, hey, when this is over, I'm going to teach you how to do this. I'm going to teach you the ropes. And I thought it was such a it was a real big testament of his character that he's like, there's someone else like him. So he knows that Miles is scared and nervous. And Miles even says, like, I don't want this. And he goes, I don't think you have a choice, kid. He goes, but I'm going to help you. And it shows you just who Peter is. So we get these really great moments with Peter. And then just like that, it's all taken away. And he's killed on screen. And we're just like, what? And before his death, he even puts what we will refer to as the goober, the chip. He gives it to him and he goes, hey, this is what you got to do, kid. You got to do this, you got to do that, you got to do this, you got to do that. All right, wear a mask, do this, do that, I'll find you. Like, he doesn't know this kid, but he knows that this kid is their only chance. And again, it's another moment of who Peter is. So when we watch him die in that scene, it's like we just had all this great interaction and it's taken away just like that. Like, you was not expecting that at all.
Right. So it's a pretty significant moment because Kingpin just brings his strength, its
Yep.
entire strength down like a double axe handle almost, right
Yeah,
on top
just
of Peter.
bam.
And it's instant. He takes him out.
Yeah.
So, and it's animated, so it's kind of, and it's cartoony and comic booky
Yes.
at the same time. Kingpin is a monster. He's huge.
He's
So,
gigantic.
so they just kind of sell that Kingpin is a literal monster that had the
Yeah.
strength to be able to do this. Miles sells it.
Yeah.
Obviously, he runs away, and then we get the Prowler chase, and
Oh,
that was intense. And now we get
yes.
these panels like we're reading a literal comic book, and it happened before, but this is where they really lean to it into it.
Mhm.
It's like, hey, you're watching a movie, but we're gonna make you feel like you're reading a comic book at the same time.
Yes. And that's what the movie does so well with the animation style, everything else. And they constantly remind us with the introduction of new characters and new story beats of this comic iteration. And it's really, really cool. And let me just put this out there too. The score for Prowler is amazing. every time we get the Prowler doing something, I can't even mimic it, but you know it. Like, he has a very specific theme that plays whenever he's on screen, and it's just great. I just had to put that out there.
Right. So then we get the scene showing everyone's reaction to Spider-Man's death, and it's really
Yeah,
emotional.
yeah,
Miles makes it back home, and there's an exchange between him and his parents. Shouldn't he be at school? He's like, "Can I sleep here for the night?" And
mhm.
then the dad's just like, "Hey, blah blah blah, you should be there." And the mom's just like, "He's upset. Let him stay here for the
Yeah,
night."
something's
You
wrong,
know.
clearly, let him stay.
And then you see them watching the TV, and Jefferson puts his hand over his mouth. He hates Spider-Man, but it
Mhm.
doesn't mean he wanted him to die, and he
Yeah,
puts his hand over his mouth as he's watching the TV. Fast forward to the eulogy, people are dressed up in Spider-Man costumes, like, the whole city shows up,
yeah,
um, for this eulogy. Now, I read that it was based upon the death of Spider-Man. Some of it was based on the death of Spider-Man,
mhm.
um, comic storyline, but you and I are Superman fans, so I
Oh,
was
yeah.
thinking about the death of Superman as I
Yes.
watched this, you know?
100% guilty as charged, me as well. I was thinking of that scene, and I thought the scene was done so well. I loved watching and seeing everyone with the Spider-Man masks and everyone the eulogy scene is incredible. Like, it's very heartfelt, it's very emotional, and Mary Jane Watson is giving the speech, and for the first time everyone now is aware that he is Peter Parker, and you have that everyone dealing with that. And you have our Stan Lee cameo, where Miles
Yeah.
wants to wear a mask. He wants to wear a mask too, so he buys a costume. And it's a really funny little joke because he goes, will it, is it going to fit? Because he's worried it's too big. And Stan Lee's character says, they all fit, eventually. And you pan over to the side, and it's kind of like, oh, because there's no refund. So one way or another, you have to keep this. But it's one of those doubles, you know what I mean? Where, like, obviously within the context of the scene itself, the character is just trying to make a buck. Like, oh, it'll fit eventually. Don't worry, no refunds, no exchanges. But I also took it as, like, sometimes you have to grow into it. You have to grow into the mask, and it's more about the symbolism of growing to become a hero. It's real quick, but it's something that I took away from it. But it was cool seeing Stanley again.
So, as the city mourns Spider Man's death, Miles tries to honor his legacy and become this new Spider Man, but
Hmm.
he inadvertently damages the drive. Um, he does fall trying his first jump, just like Tobey Maguire did in
Hmm.
Sam Raimi's Spider Man 1.
Yeah.
So, another, maybe on purpose, maybe not a throwback to the first movie there. I would
Hmm.
like to think it was on purpose, you know?
Hmm.
Um, So at Spider Man's grave, Miles meets Peter B. Parker, an
Yes.
older and worn down version of Spider Man from another dimension. So as soon as we meet him, we get the one last time
Yeah.
backstory again because Miles did it in the beginning, and actually no, because the original Peter did it in the
Yes.
beginning, and now Peter B. Parker is doing it. We get 22 years of Spider Man. We get the upside down kiss from the Raimi movie.
Yes. Yes.
Marriage, divorce, Aunt May died, all on top of his adventures. Um, this is where we've already known it by now, but we are seeing that the directors and the writers are embracing the history of Spider-Man, comics,
Hmm.
movies, and shows, everything all at
Yes.
once. Really awesome.
It was really cool because they could take advantage of the fact that they're doing a multiverse, so they can pick any story they want and implement it towards these characters and whatnot. And they took some of the heaviest stuff and they gave it to Peter B. Parker with losing Aunt May and losing Mary Jane in a divorce and going through 22 years of this and just feeling the negative effects of being Spider-Man for so long. And just the idea that him and Mary Jane are divorced, and one of the key reasons is because she wanted a family, and he didn't think he could do that. Whether he didn't feel he was ready or whether he didn't want to give it the responsibility to Spider-Man, whatever the case may be, it's just the fact that it just wasn't something that he was thinking about doing, was becoming a father. And it's heavy. Like, again, there's comedic effect to it. Like, he's in the shower with the suit and he's
Right.
eating pizza, he's gaining weight, but there's some heaviness to it. And I appreciated that they took those stories and gave it to Peter B. Parker.
So the two of them infiltrate Kingpin's research facility to steal data for a new flash drive.
Hmm.
They are confronted by mad scientist Olivia Octavius, who discovers that Peter will die from cellular decay if he remains in their dimension because she sees that he's glitching. This is
Yes.
where we get the awesome reveal of Liv being this
Mhm.
universe's Doc Ock. Did
Yes.
not see that coming.
Nope, that was another thing that the movie does really well. Again, they hit us with these twists, and there's a line in here. We're gonna come back to it later, specifically where he says, "Oh, your friends probably call you Doc Ock," and she's like, "Well, my friends call me Liv. My
Yeah.
enemies call me Doc Ock." And it was like all of a sudden you were like, "Oh my gosh, she's Doc Ock. This is great." And I love the idea that again, like you didn't see this coming. I love the surprises that we get with the multiverse.
So Miles and Peter are saved by Gwen Stacy, a Spider Woman from another dimension. We
Mhm.
already met her in the beginning of the movie as Gwanda.
Gwanda, yes.
and
Yes.
they already had an interaction. Unfortunately, Miles's hand stuck to her head, so she had to shave
Yeah.
the side of her head. And
Yep.
fans already knew that she was Gwen, but now we get to see
Mhm.
Gwen in action. It's pretty cool. We get
Yeah.
the let's do this one last time backstory for Gwen. We find
Yeah.
out her best friend died, Peter, in her universe, and that
Yup.
she came over as well. So, and Gwen just shines in this moment here as
Oh,
well.
she's amazing. She's amazing. When you
Yeah.
finally see her as Spider Gwen and she's got the suit on and she's doing anything, she's like, "Hey, what's going on? Name's Gwen." And it's just like, it's so great.
It's good. It's starting to come together, like, all the spider people from all the universes, they're
Yes.
coming together, and it kind of foreshadows what ends up happening here. Um, they go to visit, Spider-Man's aunt in Miles's universe, so the dead Peter's aunt, and, May Parker. They meet, and we get this moment where she sees Peter B. Parker,
Yeah.
and, he's like, "Oh, this is weird," So, um 'cause she's dead in his universe, and then he's
Yeah.
dead in her universe, and they're seeing each other, but she realizes it's not her Peter.
Yeah.
Um, they have a nice moment there. In a awesome reveal, we find out she's sheltering more spider people who slipped
Mhm.
into Miles' universe from other dimensions due to the Collider explosion. We have Spider-Man Noir, Penny Parker, and Spider-Ham, who are all deteriorating. Simultaneously, we get all 3 backstories. Let's do
Oh,
this one
yeah.
last time for them as
It's
well.
so good.
So good.
I'm a huge fan of Spider-Man Noir.
Yeah,
Like he's so cool, and I love that obviously he's always in black and white. It's always windy where he is. He's like the wind follows me wherever I go. Like it's just so great. They're all great, but I have a soft spot for Spider-Man Noir.
so Miles offers to help the others return home, but they tell him he lacks experience.
Mhm.
Distraught, Miles retreats to Aaron's home where he discovers Aaron is the Prowler.
Bro.
Because Prowler goes into the apartment and he's thinking, "Oh no, my Uncle Aaron. Uh-oh, he is my
Mhm.
Uncle Aaron." He flees to May's house because Prowler sees him, he doesn't see Miles.
Yeah.
And at May's house, Penny has completed the new drive, but unfortunately, he is followed by Kingpin, Prowler, Octavius, Scorpion, and Tombstone. Um, Almost a makeshift Sinister Six, you know?
Mhm.
Um, in the ensuing brawl, he reveals his identity to Aaron because Prowler's about to kill him,
Yeah,
and
he's about to kill him.
the only move he has is to lift off his mask, and obviously it works to
Yeah.
stop him. Unwilling to kill his own nephew, Aaron spares Miles' um, life, but is immediately shot by Kingpin in
Yep.
retaliation, and he dies in Miles's arms. Miles flees just as his father arrives on the scene. Jefferson mistakes the fleeing Spider-Man as Aaron's murderer, Miles.
Mhm.
The heroes regroup with the devastated Miles. They all recall the person in their lives that died. Most of them said it was Uncle Ben. Um, I think Peter B said it was May for him and Uncle Ben. I don't know if it was both, one or both. Um, Gwen said her Peter, and Spider Ham drops like the most poignant line. He says, "Miles, the hardest thing about this job is you can't always save everybody."
I'm so happy you said it
Yeah,
because I was holding that line on the tip of my tongue. I was like, all right, the moment we get an opportunity, we got to say that line is so important. And I think that it is a line that really weighs or shows the weight, I should say, when it comes to superhero movies. And I always appreciate when a comic book film or a superhero movie or any movie for that matter that lets us know that that's the reality of it is that you can't always save everyone, and that's so important, especially when it comes to superheroes, because we're talking about a superhero movie. Is that Miles just wants to be the best Spider-Man he can. He wants to live up to that Peter Parker who is no longer with them. He's like, I got to be this, I got to be that, and he's striving for perfection. But he needs to be told, and he needs to understand, like, that unfortunately things like this happen. They all have their own really tragic origin story, and this is yours. And the reality is you can't save everyone. And it's such a good line. And it's funny because it comes from Spider-Ham, like the most ridiculous character
Right.
of them all. And he just like, Miles, you just can't. And it's so well done.
So, unwilling to let Miles get killed, Peter B restrains Miles with his webs for his safety. And
Mhm.
as he's leaving, we get this incredible exchange. Miles says, "When will I know I'm ready?" And Peter B. Parker says, "You won't. It's a leap of faith. That's all it is, Miles. A leap of
Yes.
faith."
It's so every time I hear
Mm,
it, I'm just like, it is such like the voice acting, the movie itself, like everything, just that line hits. It's so important, and I absolutely love it.
yeah. So we fast forward to them trying to deactivate the collider, and everyone else goes back to their own universe. But Peter B. Parker makes the decision to stay behind and sacrifice himself by staying behind to deactivate the collider. Miles isn't having that, and he says, "No, you need to go." And Peter B is like, "How will I know things will work out?" And he just looks at him, and
Bro.
he says the line back to him. He says, "Leap of faith," right? So
Uh
it's a callback.
it,
It's wonderful.
yes, it's so good. The Miles that we have in this climax of the film, it feels like he found it, right? Like he found it. Like he has that moment where he's like, all right, this is me. This is what I have to do. Because when Peter B. Parker leaves him tied up, like they have this exchange. He goes, I want to go. And he goes, you can't. He goes, you can't, Miles. You just can't. And he's like, please. And he goes, okay, go invisible on command. Do your oh god, do your the shock on command, do it on command.
Right.
And he can't. And he goes, this is why. So he leaves him there, and Miles is just sitting there and stewing. And there's a great moment where the dad is outside the door, and he goes, Miles, you don't have to say anything. And it's a really great moment between the father and Miles where he's opening up to him, and it kind of inspires Miles, and we see him, and he's able to tap into that potential. So when we get to the third act of the movie, he's fully embraced it. He knows how to do these things on command, and he's confident. And the Miles that we see now is a very confident Spider-Man, and it's great. And he's going around doing everything that he can do. And like you said, we get this great moment where he grabs Peter B. Parker, and he says, he goes, how will I know? And like that line just comes back and goes, you won't. And then Peter just like, sleep of faith. Not bad, kid. And
Yeah,
it's
it's good.
so well done. I mean, obviously it's always great when movies can do that, when they can bring something back, especially with character growth. It was just a really, really mature moment for Miles, and it was written so well.
And at this point, Miles hadn't learned how to control his powers on command. He could do the
Hmm.
spider powers, but not the invisibility or
Hmm.
the I looked it up, the venom blast that they call it.
Venom Blast. Thank you.
Yeah, he hadn't learned, but at this point, just whatever stirred up in him, he's like, well, he got the new suit,
Hmm.
and it looks amazing, by the way.
Oh, I love it.
By the time he got there, but he's like, I'll figure this out. He still hadn't
Yes.
learned how to use the powers. Um, Jefferson arrives outside Miles's door and apologizes for his mistakes and expresses his faith in Miles inspiring him. So this is before he left to go to the collider.
Hmm.
And Miles manages through this inspiration to control his powers. He escapes his restraints and creates his own Spider-Man suit. He then joins the heroes, defeating Kingpin's enforcers and using the new drive to send them home. Kingpin fights Miles, attracting the attention of Jefferson. Realizing that Spider-Man isn't the menace he saw him as, he encourages Miles, who throws Kingpin at the kill switch, causing the collider to explode. So
Yeah.
Miles saves everybody. And they have a callback to the beginning of the movie where Uncle Aaron told him, when you're talking to a young lady, just put your
Hey.
hand up. Yeah, hey. So He just, in a way to get the, the Venom Blast working, while Kingpin is distracted, he just puts his hand on Kingpin's shoulder. Hey, and then the
Hey,
Venom
and
Blast
it
blows him away.
bam, and it shoots. It's so great.
Yeah. So the city is saved, Kingpin and his henchmen are arrested, and Jefferson receives evidence of Kingpin's murders of Peter and Aaron. And Miles hugs his father as Spider-Man. He says, I love you to his father as
Yeah,
well.
it's so funny. He goes, "I love you," and he goes, "What?" And he goes, I got your back." It's yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and he's using this deep voice with a Brooklyn accent,
All right, yeah. How you doing? Yeah.
It's great. Miles embraces the responsibilities of his new life, but later on, as the movie closes, Gwen finds a way to contact Miles from her own dimension,
Mhm.
setting up a potential sequel at the time. We get a post-credit scene in another dimension. Miguel O'Hara, also known as Spider-Man 2099, travels to Earth 67, and he ends up arguing with its Spider-Man, and we end up closing the entire movie out with the Spider-Man pointing meme.
The pointing meme. It's so
you know,
funny.
um, so that's our movie,
Oh yeah.
and so I'm gonna give some initial thoughts for this rewatch here. Um, I've seen it a few times, but once
Mhm.
again, it just gets better with every watch. It's
Yeah.
great. There's a lot of callbacks. It's not just a good Spider-Man movie, it's a great superhero movie.
Oh yeah.
So,
It's I've said this to you before. I have my top Spider-Man films, and this particular movie constantly flips. Like, I'm a huge fan of Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2. I think it's one of the best, and I'm a huge fan of this movie. And depending on the day that you ask me, they will flip. Some days I'm like, this is the greatest Spider-Man movie ever made. And I think I'm like, oh, maybe it's Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2. But I digress. Rewatching this movie, I haven't seen it. I've seen it. I think I've seen it 3 times overall. I think I've seen it 3 times overall, maybe 4. But um each time I watch it, I'm blown away by just how great it is. From the technical aspect of it, like again, the animation style is so unique and it was so great and it was so dope to watch it. And there's a lot of really, really, really good heartfelt moments in the film. We were talking about this too. The leap of faith scene in itself. Leap of faith is used throughout the movie a couple times. We have Peter B. Parker talk about it, and then we'll hear it in narration, and then Miles gets to kind of repeat it at the end. And one of my favorite sequences of the movie is when he finally embraces it, and he's wearing the new suit, and he's staring over the city, and he hears Peter say, "It goes, it's a leap of faith. That's all it is, Miles. It's just a
yeah.
leap of faith." And you have that scene where he takes the leap and he jumps, and the music kicks in. He's swinging through the city, and it's so inspiring. And it's a reminder that an animated movie. Because again, we talked about it before. Sometimes people look at animated movies and live action a little differently. They're like, oh, animated movies is fine. Like an animated movie, in my opinion, can be just as great, if not greater, than certain live action films. And this scene in particular was one of those moments that I felt like this is where the genre really hit, man. Like I felt it. I felt inspired. I got goosebumps watching it. And that's what this movie does really well. Is there's a lot of really good moments like that. There's a lot of character arcs and growth. Obviously we have Miles who grows. We have our Peter B. Parker who grows really
Right.
well. From in the beginning of the movie, we talked about it, where him and Mary Jane Watson are not working out because she wants kids and he doesn't. And throughout this movie, you're watching him be a mentor to this kid, and he's loving it. And the whole movie is like, I'm proud of you, Miles. Yeah, you're doing it, Miles. You're doing it. Let's do it like this. Okay. Tap twice and swing. Tap twice and swing. Like that's what we're doing. And it's great. And like at the very end of the movie, he kind of says, he goes, do I want kids? And it's small and it's throwaway, but it just goes to show you that growth that he's had, that maybe he didn't believe in himself enough. Maybe he didn't have that confidence that he could be that type of a father figure. And here he is training this kid, with the powers and responsibilities that they have. Like it's another aspect of the movie that I really enjoy. So when I rewatch it, I love that those moments still hit. Those emotional beats still hit, the character arc still hit, and it's why this movie works as well as it does. Like from top to bottom, this movie's magnificent.
So there's just so many things for me that worked. For me, one, the urban atmosphere. They didn't
Yes.
they leaned into the fact that not only was Miles a person of color, but the part of the city that he's from was heavily inspired,
Mhm.
by urban culture. Um, if we have a movie set in New York City, we got to have urban influence,
Yeah, yeah.
and the atmosphere and the music fit for this particular section. We got Sunflower, that's one of his favorite songs, and then
Yes.
we had Danger blasting when he did the Leap of
Dude,
Faith. It's
so good.
it's good stuff. Um,
So good.
I put this down because I know you love this. Miles spoke Spanish,
Bro.
and especially with his mother, sometimes with
Mhm.
other people, lots of Hispanic references. They lean into the fact that not only is Miles black, but he is also Hispanic as well.
Yes, as a Puerto Rican male, again, we talk about this representation matters, and I love that you have Miles Morales, who is half African American and half Puerto Rican, and I loved how great his mom was. I love that they spoke Spanish. I love that there was Spanglish in the film. I love that you would hear music in the background. I love that you would see the flag in the background. Just little things, and they even do some more in the sequel. So when we talk about the sequel, that's going to be really great. There's moments that I've had friends talk to me and be like, oh man, I really loved seeing this part of the Hispanic culture in it because I felt like I was seeing my family. And I love that. I love that about representation. So it was really cool. And like you said, they leaned into the urban culture, they leaned into the atmosphere of New York, because New York is a melting pot of so many different cultures. And I think sometimes it's easy to forget that depending on what you're watching. But this movie leaned into that aspect again with the music, just even having the art between Uncle Aaron and Miles being graffiti. Like that's how they express themselves. They did graffiti on the walls and that was their art. It's a very underground thing that happens in New York and things like that. So I thought that was very cool. But there's a lot, like you said, there's a lot of things that stood out that helped to separate it from other superhero movies.
So we recently found out that Phil Lord and Christopher Miller,
Hmm.
the team behind the Lego movies, um, they ended up writing this and producing this movie, but they had originally been brought on to pen the script for The Flash that
Yes.
um, yeah, Rick Famuyiwa was going to
Hmm.
direct, and unfortunately that got scrapped um, in favor of whoever eventually Andy Muschietti
Hmm.
eventually came on, um, but apparently they didn't use the same exact script, but it's it was hinted that the script that they use for Into the Spider-Verse was possibly going to be the script that they used for Flash.
Okay.
So that's that's pretty awesome. It's like,
It
hey,
is.
we
It
didn't
is.
get to use this for Flash, but we obviously they reworked it and rewrote it and everything like that because they said the original Flash wasn't going to have the multiverse in it. So,
Okay.
but there were many aspects. Like it basically led to them writing this script, and obviously since this movie was released, another one got released, and they announced that the
Oh
third one
yeah.
was going to be coming out. So, um, Lord and Miller are doing pretty well now. It
Oh, they're
worked out.
doing great.
They didn't
Yeah.
get to do Flash, but this ended up
This is
happening for them.
this is one of those situations where obviously we've heard it time and time again. When one door closes, another one opens. When a door closes, that's an opportunity elsewhere. I would have loved to have seen or even get to read what that script for the Flash was, and it unfortunately didn't happen for them. But then they in turn got to make arguably one of the greatest superhero movies out there, which is this movie that we're talking about
Right.
now.
Yeah.
So
Right.
it's not a bad
Right.
deal.
So
It's not a bad deal.
right, and they didn't direct it, but they wrote it and produced
Yeah, they
it,
wrote it. Yeah.
and that small team of people ended up directing it, but they were definitely some of the main people behind,
Mhm.
seeing this come to pass here. Um, so let's take a look at the budget and box office. Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse was made for 90 million
Okay.
and it ended up grossing 384.3 million. So
Mhm.
huge box office success. Um, Not bad for an animated movie,
No.
especially based upon how much they spent to make it. Could it have made more money? Obviously, but
Yeah. Yeah, this is one of those movies that I wish made more because I think it's deserving of it. I think it's one of those movies that, and again, 300 million on a 90 million dollar budget is nothing to sneeze at. That's an amazing pull. I would have loved this movie made 500 million because it was just that good. There wasn't a single person that I know who saw this movie who wasn't raving about it. And I wish that it would have just continued and continued and continued. But I'm regardless of how much it made or didn't make, again, it made a
mm,
lot. It made
well,
really good money, made really
right.
good money,
Well,
but people talk really highly of it.
Well, a little movie by the name of Aquaman came out a couple weeks later,
Yup.
and went
Yep.
on to make 1 billion.
A billion. Yeah. Yep.
So,
That's what happens.
the box office kinda got hit because of that movie, but,
Mhm.
it's fine. It still did well. The following year, the Oscars came calling, as I like to
Mhm.
say, and Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse was nominated and won Best Animated Feature, for
Deserving.
Sony,
Yeah.
the other nominees were Incredibles 2,
Mhm.
Isle of Dogs, that's, Wes Anderson, Mirai, and Ralph Breaks the Internet, the Wreck-It Ralph sequel.
Oh, okay.
So,
I remember that.
against all those movies, um, well deserving.
Oh, yeah.
It was such a triumph to see this happen,
I
um,
was so happy.
for
It was
this
for
movie.
obvious reasons. I think something that played a role too, and it might be harder for us to see it because we're a little well versed to a degree, but I'm sure that there was a large amount of people who were not familiar with Miles Morales whatsoever.
Right.
And I think that also played a role because again, when you think of Spider-Man traditionally, it's Peter Parker. It's Peter Parker. And Miles Morales is obviously more new of a character when you're comparing to the many, many years of Peter Parker. And I feel like there may have been a few people that were unfamiliar. They were like, oh, this is a new Spider-Man. Like, what is it? Not knowing that Miles Morales had been around for a little bit. And I'm very happy to say that since this movie, I would say Miles Morales' popularity at this point in time,
Oh,
this might
yeah.
be bold. It might be bold for me to say this, is just as high as a Peter Parker at this point, because the Miles Morales character, you had the sequel, which did amazing, and then you had the video games, and
Right.
the video games did really well. He had his own standalone video game. It was smaller. It was a smaller scale game in comparison to the other. But now you've got Spider-Man 2, where Miles is heavily featured, and Sony announced that Miles Morales will be the Spider-Man moving forward in the games. So I'm very happy to see that, even though the movie made good money, 300 mil. To see the success and the growth of the character up to this point has been really exciting. And I'm really excited for the character and where they go with him moving forward.
Yeah, and to your point, we don't know who's gonna get him, but I think Sony had said they want live action Miles. It's between them and Marvel Studios, so we don't know
Yeah,
who's gonna get him. Might be a shared thing again, just like
could
they
be.
did with the Spider-Man solo movies. But um, we're hoping for the best. When,
Yeah,
not if, but when that happens for the live action Miles. Really looking forward to it.
I
Um,
want it.
yeah, absolutely. Let's give some love to the cast here,
Yes.
and it is a lot of people here.
Oh,
I'm gonna go through everybody. So we
yeah.
have Shamik Moore as Miles Morales.
Hmm.
We have Jake Johnson as Peter B. Parker. Haley Steinfeld,
Your girl.
who I
Your
like,
girl.
yeah, she's Gwen Stacy, Spider Woman. We have Mahershala Ali as Aaron Davis, the Prowler. Brian Tyree Henry as Jefferson Davis. We have Lily Tomlin as May Parker. Luna Lauren Velez as Rio Morales, Zoe Kravitz as Mary Jane MJ
Bro.
Parker in
Yup.
Miles's universe. Yeah. They had a little scene where Peter B bumped into her and he's thinking
Hmm.
he's getting flashbacks of his, broken relationship with her in his universe. So great scene with them. We have John Mulaney as Peter Porker, Spider Ham, Kimiko Glenn as Penny Parker,
Yes.
Nicolas Cage as Peter Parker,
Bro.
Spider-Man Noir. Come on.
Loved it. Absolutely loved
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, he was great, to the point where people wanted a Spider-Man
Yeah.
Noir movie by
I
himself.
I
Yeah,
was one of those people. I was
yeah,
like, guys, give Spider-Man Noir his own movie, please.
yeah. We have Catherine Hahn as, Dr. Olivia Liv Octavius,
Hmm.
Liev Schreiber as Wilson Fisk, the Kingpin, Chris Pine as Miles's Peter Parker, the original that
Bro,
dies.
he was awesome.
Um, this is a short thing that if you blink and you miss it, but that's Lake Bell as Vanessa Fisk, and I had to give her a shout out, not only because she's got an acting career, but
Hmm.
she's made a lot of waves as Poison Ivy on the Harley
Yeah.
Quinn show in recent
Oh
years.
yeah.
So I want to give her love for her voice acting here. And obviously at the end credits we have your boy Oscar Isaac as Miguel O'Hara, Spider-Man
Yes.
2099. So shout out to everybody for being a part of this movie. Um, I mean, obviously, you know, Shamik Moore as Miles Morales, Jake Johnson as Peter B. Parker, and Haley Steinfeld as Gwen Stacy. All amazing job. as the
Yes.
leads, and the scene stealer was probably Nicolas Cage as
N
Spider-Man Noir.
Every time he
Yeah.
spoke, it was like again, it was electric because, like, the way his voice personified Spider-Man Noir was just so great.
Yeah.
Again, I was so ready for a standalone movie, and when they announced the sequel, I was like, "Please tell me he's coming back." Like, I was like, "Is Spider-Man Noir coming back?" I don't know. We don't know. We have to wait to see the movie. Okay, we have to wait to see the movie. But it was great. And Jake Johnson, I've watched Jake Johnson from like a New Girl, that television show,
Right.
and I thought that his comedic timing and his voice lent so well to this Spider-Man. He's one of my favorite aspects of the movie. Again, everybody does a great job, but I loved him as Spider-Man. I think he nailed the sarcasm really well, the aged and the bitter Spider-Man really well, especially because of who he plays, Nick, on New Girl. It just kind of fit really well. But the whole cast is stacked, man. The whole cast is stacked, and everyone stands out in their own way.
So we're gonna start winding things down with our closing thoughts here, and we're just gonna go for it. Um, this was so good, and
Oh yeah.
you know, for me, it's one of the best Spider-Man movies ever.
Yep.
Um, some were calling it the best Spider-Man movie upon its
Yep.
release, and I agree with it being one of the best Spider-Man movies. I also agree that
Mhm.
it's one of the best superhero movies of all time.
Yes,
So,
I agree.
um, without giving away too much, because we do want to do our Spider-Man ranking one day.
Mhm.
Um, for you, where does Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse movie land for you as far as being one of the best Spider-Man movies ever and one of the best superhero movies ever?
It's really high because as I mentioned, it's with movies in general, you can watch a movie and fall into the hype and then rewatch it later and go, "Oh, it doesn't really land for me as well as it did on first watch." It happens with all movies. This is one of those movies that it doesn't matter how many times I watch it, it lands just as hard. And I can feel that way about Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies too. Like, I can watch the first Sam Raimi Spider-Man movie and some people will say it's nostalgia goggles, and there might be a little bit of nostalgia at play, but I can feel what it was like to watch that, you know, when it first came out, and especially with Spider-Man 2. And when I watch Into the Spider-Verse, I get that same feeling of like something special. Like I'm watching something special, the same way I felt when I was watching the Raimi films for the first time. Even though the Spider-Man character is a very popular character, and we've seen that character in many different iterations, this was Miles Morales. So this is completely new. It's a new interpretation on the big screen. Again, comics and whatnot is one thing, but to see it on the big screen at this level was great with the animation style and everything. So it ranks really, really high. And as I mentioned before, there are days where I'll think, okay, this is the greatest Spider-Man movie ever made. And other times I'm feeling another movie. And that's fun to me because it can flip depending on my mood and depending where I am. But it would be it would be like it'd be ridiculous for me to think that it's not one of the best superhero movie made of all time. Like it nails everything that I think a superhero movie should be. Again, just something as simple as that line delivery of like, you can't save everyone. And I think that's so important for a superhero movie is, again, there have been times, and I don't want to rag on any movies in particular, but there've been some movies sometimes where I'm like, oh, it's too clean, it's too perfect. Like the good guys are always doing the right thing, and it's this. I like complication. I like things to get a little gray, and I love that the movie pointed that out. And for aspects like that, for pointing out the accuracy of what it would be like to be a hero, and the character growths and arcs and the animation style, it's definitely super high. And like you said, when we do our breakdown or full ranking, I'm gonna have to sit really long and hard, man, because this is gonna be a
Mhm.
battle. This is
Right.
absolutely going to be a battle for the top spot on Spider-Man, because again, the Sam Raimi ones are relatively high,
They are.
and this movie is really high, as well as the sequel, Across the Spider-Verse, which we'll talk about
Right.
later. There is a solid a battle of three movies that it's going to be a fight to the death. Like, it's
Yeah.
going to be a bloodbath, and I know that when we discuss it, a few days will go by and I'll go, oh man, maybe this one should have been one.
Right.
You know what I mean? And that's the beauty of it, because they're all that great. But this particular movie, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, is extremely high on the Spider-Man ranking. And when we get there, people will know exactly how high. But I think among superhero films in general, it's one of the greatest ever made, period. Easily.
Yeah, so for me, I will echo the sentiment that you said. It felt special upon my first watch, and For me, the Raimi movies took some time for me to kind of
Mhm.
be like, "You know what? Those were really special." You know?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, Spider-Man 2 was amazing on the first watch, no pun
Yeah. Yeah.
intended. But as time passed, it was like, "No, not only was it good at the time, it's still good now."
Oh,
You
yeah.
know? Like, you can go back and watch it and enjoy it. And, but for me, with Into the Spider-Verse, from the first watch, I knew I saw something special,
Yep.
and it hit me. I know it's kind of a cheat here, but it hit me almost as much as the first time I finished the Spider-Man game
Oh,
on,
okay.
on PS4. You know, like, that's another conversation altogether, because I feel
Oh,
like
dude.
that if that ever got made into if they found a way to make a movie like that, oh my gosh, and there's no way to do that because we talked about this. You
Mhm.
can't convert a video game into a movie and duplicate the experience,
Yeah, you
unfortunately.
yeah, that
It's I mean, there's been good video game movies, but to
mhm.
replicate how you felt for all those hours, it's not going to happen,
It
you know?
you can never do it that true justice and feeling. Again, you can
Right,
make something like The Last of Us, which I loved as a
right,
television show. I absolutely loved it. But there's always something different when you're holding that controller and playing, and Spider-Man
right,
game is a great example of that.
right,
But yeah, it's gonna be hard ranking. It's gonna be very, very, very hard ranking these movies. And I do
right.
also want to point out the specialness of the Sam Raimi. When the Sam Raimi films came out, I was in the first movie came out, I was in high school. I was a kid. So that's why I said there's some nostalgia goggles as well. But I still think that when I watch those movies today, that they're still special. I watched Into the Spider Verse as an adult, as a grown man, and I still got hit with that special feeling. So it was no longer this idea of like, oh, I'm a young kid seeing Spider-Man for the first time on the big screen and being blown away. The same way when I was a kid seeing Batman on screen, seeing Superman on screen, seeing the X-Men on screen. Like I was a kid for all of those experiences. But this I was an adult. I was a grown man watching it and still feeling like this is something special. And because of that, it's always going to rank really high.
Um, we're gonna close out with this. There's a few animated superhero movies that come to mind for me,
Mhm.
and Mask of the Phantasm is one of them.
Yes.
There's another one. I don't know if it came first or second, but Batman Under the Red Hood. That one
One of
comes to
my
mind.
favorite ever. It's so good.
And then last but not least, your boy Jay Oliver, The Flashpoint Paradox.
Oh yeah.
You
Yep.
know, so for me, when I saw Spider-Man to the Spider-Verse, immediately came to mind as being one of the best animated superhero movies that could line up with those guys, you
Oh
know?
yeah.
And just wanted to give that a shout out there. So, alrighty, folks. That was the Panel Bros official breakdown for Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. If you could please give us a like, share, and subscribe on YouTube at the Panel Bros, we'd appreciate it. As always, those subscribes go a long way to help us with our reach. And if you could please let us know how you felt about Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse in the comments below, we'd appreciate that as well. And let us know, if this is your favorite Spider-Man movie, and if
That's
it
what I
isn't,
want to know.
if it isn't, you know, how many Spider-Man movies would you put ahead of this if you so chose? And also, how you feel about maybe Miles Morales coming to live action one day. Let us know in the comments below. For Ricardo Segura, this is Anderson Marchak saying thank you for coming to the panel.